You wake to the familiar hum of recycled air and the soft chime of your personal chronometer. Another day in service to the Imperium. Another day of duty. The corridor outside your hab unit stretches endlessly in both directions, lit by flickering lumens that cast dancing shadows on walls the color of old bone. You've lived here for 3 years now, and you still haven't seen the end of this particular passage. Today is different, though. Today, you have a new assignment. The data slate feels heavier than it should as you hold it in your hands, its surface warm from the previous courier's grip. Your name appears at the top, followed by a series of classifications and security clearances you didn't know you possessed. Below that, in the sterile Gothic script of the Administratum, are the words that will define the rest of your existence. Ossuary Division, Subsector Calcium Management, Sector Solar. Report to Administrator Vexterdius for briefing and orientation. Ossuary. The word rolls around in your mind as you walk. Surely it's a code name, you tell yourself. Everything in the Imperium has a code name. The munitions factories are called blessing workshops. The execution chambers are termed spiritual counseling centers. This is probably something equally mundane, hidden behind another layer of imperial bureaucracy. The transport servitor's directions lead you deeper into the administrative levels than you've ever been. The walls here are different, not the usual gray rockcrete and steel, but something that gleams with an almost organic sheen. As you run your fingers along the surface, you realize with growing unease that the material has a familiar texture. Smooth, hard, with tiny pores and an almost imperceptible grain. First day. The voice behind you makes you jump. A middle-aged woman in administrator robes approaches, her face bearing the kind of practiced smile you see on mid-level functionaries throughout the Imperium. Her robes rustle as she walks, and you notice tiny white flecks caught in the fabric like dandruff. Yes, ma'am. I'm reporting to Administrator Vexterdius. Ah, the Ossuary Division, Calcium Management. She nods approvingly. Vital work, absolutely vital. I'm Senior Clerk Hendricks, been here 15 years now. She gestures to the walls around you. Beautiful, isn't it? All local materials, you know, very sustainable, very efficient. The word efficient hangs in the air like incense smoke. You follow her through corridors that seem to stretch forever, each one lined with the same bone-white material. The smell here is different too. Not the usual recycled air and industrial lubricants, but something cleaner, more organic, like calcium powder mixed with industrial sanitizer. What exactly does the Ossuary Division do? You ask, though part of you already dreads the answer. Senior Clerk Hendricks pauses at a massive blast door marked with the familiar aquila, but beneath it, etched in smaller script, are words that make your stomach clench. Sacred Harvest Operations, authorized personnel only. Oh, you'll learn all about it in orientation, she says cheerfully, her hands dancing across the security pad. It's really quite fascinating work, essential to the Imperium's continued function. We're one of the most productive divisions in the sector, you know. Our quotas last year exceeded expectations by 12%. The blast door opens with a pneumatic hiss, and suddenly you're standing in a vast chamber that defies comprehension. The ceiling disappears into darkness above, supported by pillars that gleam with that same bone-white sheen. But it's not the architecture that stops your breath, it's the activity. Hundreds of administrators sit at desk terminals arranged in perfect rows, their fingers dancing across data slates and cogitator interfaces. Above them, massive viewing screens display scrolling columns of numbers, charts, and what appear to be anatomical diagrams. The sound of their collective work creates a soft susurrus, like whispered prayers or distant machinery. Impressive, isn't it? Senior Clerk Hendricks beams with genuine pride. This is just one of our data processing centers. We have 17 more on this level alone. You notice the screensavers on the inactive terminals as you pass. Instead of the usual imperial eagles or sacred symbols, they display slowly rotating images of bones. Femurs, tibias, skulls, ribcage, all rendered in clinical detail, with measurements and classification numbers scrolling beneath them. Ah, here we are. She stops at a desk slightly larger than the others, where a thin man with pale eyes looks up from his work. His fingers are stained with something that looks like bone dust, and when he speaks, his voice carries the dry whisper of someone who spent too long breathing recycled air and calcium particles. Administrator Vexterdius, Senior Clerk Hendricks announces, "Your new analyst has arrived." Vexterdius examines you with the clinical detachment of someone evaluating livestock. His eyes linger on your shoulders, your posture, the way you hold yourself. After a moment that stretches far too long, he nods approvingly. "Good bone structure," he murmurs, making a note on his data slate. "Excellent calcium deposition, dense cortical development, you'll do well here." He looks up, and for the first time his expression approximates warmth. "Welcome to the Ossuary Division. You're going to help us save the Imperium." "Sir, I'm not sure I understand what." "Of course you don't, not yet." He gestures to the screens around you where the endless streams of data continue their hypnotic flow. "But you will. Take a seat and I'll explain your duties." You settle into the chair beside his desk, noting that it's surprisingly comfortable, molded perfectly to support your spine. The material feels familiar, though you can't quite place it. "Your job," Vexterdius begins, his fingers still dancing across his interface, "is to help us manage our quotas. Resource allocation, quality assessment, logistics coordination. Nothing too complex for someone with your background." He pauses, consulting his data slate. "Tell me, do you know what our primary resource requirements are for this sector?" "I know, sir. I assumed I'd be briefed. 2-3 million femurs by the end of Terran cycle 847, he says, as casually as someone might discuss the weather. "That's just this month, mind you. We also need 1.8 million tibias, 900,000 skull assemblies, and approximately 4.2 million miscellaneous skeletal components." He looks up from his calculations. "Does that seem manageable to you?" The words hit you like a physical blow. Femurs, tibias. Skull assemblies. The clinical terminology cannot hide what he's actually saying, and suddenly the bone-white walls, the calcium dust in the air, the organic texture of your chair, it all becomes horribly, impossibly clear. "Sir," you manage, your voice barely above a whisper, "when you say femurs." "Human femurs, naturally. Grade A quality, properly harvested and processed. Nothing but the best for Imperial use." He returns to his data slate, scrolling through columns of numbers. "We've been having supply issues from Sector Pacificus, something about a processing plant malfunction, so we're expecting increased quotas from the local sources." Your mind reels, desperately seeking some alternative explanation, some metaphor or code that would make this make sense. But the evidence surrounds you. The walls built from compressed bone matter, the calcium dust that coats everything, the anatomical diagrams rotating endlessly on the screens. "The previous analyst in your position was quite good," Vexterdius continues conversationally. "Efficient, dedicated, never questioned the work. Sadly, his own calcium density ratings came back as grade A+ during his routine health screening." He sighs with what sounds like genuine regret. Such a loss to the division. But his contribution to the Imperium's greater needs was substantial. The implication hangs in the air like the sword of Damocles. You look around the vast chamber, at the hundreds of administrators calmly processing their quotas of human bones, and realize that everyone here lives with the knowledge that their own bodies might one day become entries in these same databases. "I know it's overwhelming at first," Vexterdius says, perhaps noticing your pale complexion. "But you'll come to understand the nobility of our work. Every bone we process serves the greater glory of the Imperium. Every calculation we make brings humanity closer to its ultimate destiny." He hands you a data slate filled with supply manifests, shipping schedules, and quality assessment protocols. The screen displays a three-dimensional model of a human skeleton, slowly rotating, with each bone labeled and assigned a numerical value. "This is your workstation," he says, indicating the terminal beside his desk. Your login credentials are already configured. I suggest you start with the morning reports. We received a substantial shipment from Hive Primus last night, and the quality assessment teams are expecting our analysis by mid-shift. You activate the terminal with trembling fingers, and immediately the screen fills with data that makes your stomach lurch. Shipping manifests listing thousands of calcium units, quality grades ranging from A+ to D-, processing schedules for facilities with names like Sacred Harvest Station Tertius and Blessed Ossuary Processing Center Gamma. Why? The question escapes before you can stop it. Why does the Imperium need so much? Vex Sturdius pauses in his work, his pale eyes studying you with something that might be sympathy. Around you, the soft sounds of the data processing center continue, keyboards clicking, screens humming, the whispered consultations between administrators. All of it focused on the systematic harvesting and management of human bones on a scale that defies comprehension. That, he says finally, is a question that will be answered in time. For now, focus on your duties. Learn the systems. Understand the processes. He leans closer and you smell the calcium dust on his breath. And remember, we are all servants of the Imperium. Some serve in life, others in death, and the fortunate serve in both. The data slate in your hands displays a new manifest, this one from a transport vessel called the Bone Harvester. Its cargo hold contains 127,000 femurs, 203,000 ribs, and 89,000 complete skull assemblies. All human, all processed with the clinical efficiency of an industrial operation. You realize with dawning horror that you're not just witnessing this system, you're becoming part of it. Your fingers are already moving across the interface, inputting data, processing quotas, managing the logistics of humanity's systematic transformation into raw materials. And somewhere in the depths of your mind, a terrible thought begins to take root. In a universe as vast and brutal as this one, maybe reducing people to their component elements isn't evil, maybe it's just necessary. The lumens flicker overhead, casting shadows that dance across walls built from the bones of the faithful. In the distance, you can hear the sound of transport ships arriving with their cargo, and you know that tomorrow's quotas are already being loaded, processed, and cataloged. Your first day in the Ossuary Division has begun. The supply manifests tell a story that your mind struggles to process. You've been reviewing shipping logs for 3 hours now, and the numbers have ceased to feel like numbers at all. They've become something else, an abstract representation of horror that your consciousness refuses to fully grasp. Transport vessel, sacred contribution, cargo, 245,000 skeletal units, grade A through C+ classification. Origin, Hive Secundus. Estimated processing time, 72 hours. Freight hauler calcium tide, cargo, 189,000 femoral components, 234,000 miscellaneous bone fragments. Origin, Agri-World Harvest Station Alpha. Processing priority, urgent. Deep Void Cargo Ship Bone Garden Cargo, 1 million assorted skeletal elements. Origin, Death World Processing Complex Gamma. Status, in transit, arrival expected Terran Day 847. 231. Each entry represents more human remains than existed in your entire birth hive, yet they scroll past your screen with the mundane regularity of any other Imperial supply chain. Administrator Vex Sturdius notices your expression and leans over to examine your work. First time seeing the sector-wide logistics. He asks, his voice carrying a hint of what might be pride. Impressive, isn't it? The scope of the operation. You point to one particular entry that makes your stomach clench. This ship, the Eternal Harvest, it says here that it's carrying 3.2 million complete skeletal assemblies from just one processing station. How is that even possible? Hive Primus Ossuary Complex, Vex Sturdius explains, settling into the chair beside you. One of our most efficient facilities. They can process approximately 50,000 units per day during peak operations. He calls up a schematic on his screen, displaying a facility that stretches for kilometers beneath the hive city's foundations. Completely automated, of course, the latest in Imperial technology. The schematic shows conveyor systems, processing chambers, and storage facilities that dwarf anything you've ever imagined. Massive holding areas are labeled with terms like pre-processing queue and quality assessment staging. Transport tubes snake through the complex like arteries, carrying their cargo to different sectors based on bone density, size, and intended application. But where do they all come from? You whisper, afraid to speak the question too loudly. Vexterdius pulls up another screen, this one displaying population statistics and demographic analyses. The data is broken down by hive level, occupation, age group, and something labeled as calcium efficiency rating. The beauty of the imperial system, he says, is its scale. Consider this. Hive Primus alone has a population of approximately 800 million souls. Even if we only required contributions from, say, 2% of the population annually, that would still provide us with 16 million skeletal units per year from a single hive. The mathematics of horror spread across your screen like a plague. 2%. Such a small number, yet it represents millions of human beings reduced to raw materials. And that's just one hive on one world, in one sector of an Imperium that spans 1 million worlds. Of course, Vexterdius continues, scrolling through more statistics, the actual percentages vary based on local conditions. Worlds facing orc invasions might contribute 10 or 15% of their population. Death worlds undergoing Imperial reclamation projects have been known to provide much higher percentages. He pauses on a particular entry. Cadia, before its unfortunate destruction, was contributing nearly 30% of its population annually to the Imperial calcium reserves. You stare at the screen, watching population numbers decrease in real time as new reports arrive from across the sector. Each downward tick represents thousands of lives transformed into industrial materials, yet the system tracks them with the same clinical precision used for measuring promethium reserves or adamantium shipments. How long has this been going on? You ask. The question seems to amuse Vexterdius. He leans back in his chair, gesturing toward the bone-white walls that surround you. How long has the Imperium needed building materials? How long have we required calcium supplements for our industrial processes? How long have our sacred spaces needed consecration with the physical remains of the faithful? He calls up a historical database, its entries stretching back thousands of years. The earliest records are fragmented, damaged by time and data corruption, but they tell a story of gradual escalation. What began during the Age of Strife as emergency measures, using the bones of the dead to fortify settlements against alien horrors, eventually evolved into systematic harvesting operations. The Great Crusade required unprecedented amounts of building materials, Vexterdius explains, highlighting entries from M31. Compliant worlds needed imperial infrastructure. Fortress monasteries required construction. The sacred architecture of newly built cathedrals demanded appropriate materials. His finger traces a line of exponentially increasing numbers. What started as practical necessity became sacred duty. The database reveals the bureaucratic evolution of systematic bone harvesting. Early records refer to battlefield recovery operations and post-conflict resource reclamation. By the time of the Horus Heresy, these had become voluntary contribution programs and civic duty assessments. The modern terminology, calcium management and skeletal resource allocation, didn't appear until much later, but the underlying reality had been growing steadily for millennia. Look at this, Vexterdius says, pulling up a comparative analysis that makes your blood freeze. If we were to process the entire population of ancient Terra, all the humans who ever lived on humanity's birthworld, their total skeletal mass would supply the Imperium's calcium needs for approximately 6 months. 6 months. The birth world of humanity, every person who ever lived there, reduced to 6 months of raw materials for an empire that spans the galaxy. The scale is so vast it becomes almost abstract, like trying to comprehend the distance between stars. But that's impossible, you protest. How can the Imperium possibly need that much calcium? What could require such massive quantities? Vexterdius smiles, but it's the smile of someone who knows secrets they cannot yet share. All will become clear in time. For now, understand that every bone, every gram of calcium, every processed skeletal element serves the greater good of humanity. Nothing is wasted. Nothing is without purpose. He shows you the classification system used to grade harvested materials. Grade A bones come from healthy adults aged 1835, with optimal calcium density and no structural defects. Grade B represents older adults or those with minor health issues. Grade C includes children and the elderly, their bones suitable for processing into supplements and industrial compounds. Grade D, euphemistically termed recycling grade, encompasses everything else. The efficiency is remarkable, Vexterdius continues, pulling up production statistics. Modern processing techniques can extract usable calcium from even the most degraded skeletal material. Bone meal, calcium carbonate, industrial supplements, nothing is truly waste in the Imperial system. Your screen updates with new shipping schedules, showing the constant flow of materials throughout the sector. Transport ships loaded with processed bone products depart for agri-worlds, where the calcium will supplement livestock feed and soil conditioning programs. Other shipments head to forge worlds, where calcium compounds are essential in certain manufacturing processes. The largest shipments, you notice, are bound for Terra itself, though their specific destinations are classified above your clearance level. The logistics alone are a marvel of Imperial engineering, Vexterdius observes. Consider the transportation requirements, moving billions of tons of processed skeletal material across interstellar distances, maintaining quality control standards, ensuring proper storage conditions. The Administratum has developed an entire subsidiary branch dedicated solely to calcium logistics management. He brings up an organizational chart that resembles a vast tree, its branches spreading across multiple sectors and subsectors. Each node represents a different aspect of the bone harvesting operation: collection centers, processing facilities, quality control departments, transportation divisions, and distribution networks. The complexity rivals that of the Imperial Navy itself. We're just one small part of it, he says, gesturing around the data processing center. This facility manages skeletal resource allocation for a single subsector. There are thousands of similar installations throughout the Imperium, each handling their portion of the overall operation. The weight of this revelation settles over you like a shroud. This isn't some aberrant policy or local practice. It's a fundamental aspect of how the Imperium functions. The systematic conversion of human beings into raw materials is as integral to Imperial operations as tithing grain or recruiting guardsmen. But surely, you say, grasping for some thread of hope, surely there must be alternatives. Synthetic calcium production, mining operations, something that doesn't require. Vexterdius shakes his head sadly. The Imperium has investigated every alternative. Calcium mining operations exist, certainly, but they cannot match the purity and bioavailability of human bone calcium. Synthetic production requires rare earth elements that are needed for more critical applications. Animal bones lack the specific mineral composition required for our most important uses. He leans closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. Besides, there's a spiritual component that synthetic materials simply cannot replicate. Human bones carry the essence of faith, the physical manifestation of Imperial devotion. When we build our sacred spaces with these materials, we're creating structures that are literally composed of human sacrifice and dedication. The screens around you continue their endless display of numbers, each one representing lives transformed into resources. You watch transport schedules updating in real time, showing new shipments arriving from dozens of worlds. The flow never stops, never slows, never hesitates. How many? You ask finally. How many people are processed annually to maintain this system? Vexterdius consults his data slate, his fingers dancing across multiple databases. That's classified information at your current security level, he says, but I can tell you that the numbers are substantial, sufficient to meet the Imperium's growing needs while maintaining acceptable population levels across all compliant worlds. The euphemism, acceptable population levels, hangs in the air like a death sentence. You're beginning to understand that the Imperium doesn't just harvest its dead. It actively manages living populations to ensure steady supplies of raw materials. The implications make your hands shake as you continue processing shipping manifests. The beautiful thing, Vexterdius continues, oblivious to your growing horror, is how seamlessly it integrates with other Imperial systems. Population control, resource management, industrial production, spiritual devotion, all unified into a single, elegant solution. Your screen chimes with a new priority message. Another transport ship has arrived, this one carrying what the manifest lists as emergency requisition materials from a world you don't recognize. The cargo bay contains 2 million skeletal units, all classified as Grade A or above. The shipping notes mention something about population compliance issues resolved and full planetary contribution achieved. You're starting to understand what those euphemisms really mean. As your first day continues, the full scope of the Imperial bone harvesting system becomes clear. It's not just a resource extraction operation. It's a fundamental restructuring of what it means to be human in the 41st millennium. Everyone is simultaneously citizen and raw material, person and resource, individual and component in a vast machine that transforms human bones into the physical infrastructure of civilization itself. The lumens flicker overhead, and you notice for the first time that even they're encased in fixtures made from that familiar bone-white material. Everything around you, the walls, the furniture, the very air filtration systems, exists because somewhere, someone was reduced to their component elements and processed into building materials. And you're helping to manage it all. Your third week in the Ossuary Division brings a new assignment that makes your previous work seem almost pleasant by comparison. Administrator Vexterdius slides a data slate across your desk with an expression you've learned to dread, the look of someone about to reveal another layer of the horror that defines your existence. Quality assessment protocols, he says simply. Time you learned how the selection process actually works. The data slate displays a schedule of appointments at something called the Civic Health and Wellness Center, located in the middle levels of Hive Secundus. Your role, according to the assignment brief, is to observe and document the evaluation procedures used to determine calcium quality ratings for Imperial citizens. You'll be working with Medikey Assessor Krantz, Vexterdius explains. She's one of our most experienced evaluators. 15 years of service, excellent eye for bone density classification. She'll teach you everything you need to know about proper assessment techniques. The transport to Hive Secundus takes 3 hours through the undercity tunnels, giving you time to review the evaluation criteria loaded on your slate. The documents read like medical textbooks, filled with technical terminology about cortical thickness, trabecular density, and mineral composition ratios. But buried within the clinical language are details that make your stomach clench. Optimal harvest age, 1835 standard years preferred occupational background, manual labor, military service, construction work contraindications, previous bone fractures, nutritional deficiencies, extended exposure to industrial toxins, special considerations, genetic markers indicating superior calcium absorption. The Civic Health and Wellness Center looks exactly like what it claims to be, a clean, efficient medical facility designed to process large numbers of people quickly. Citizens queue in orderly lines, clutching appointment notifications and identification documents. Most seem genuinely grateful for the opportunity to receive free Imperial healthcare, chatting quietly about their minor ailments and health concerns. You find Medici Assessor Krantz in Evaluation Chamber 7, reviewing files while her servoskull assistant prepares the examination equipment. She's a middle-aged woman with the kind of clinical detachment you've come to associate with long-term Imperial service, her augmetic eyes clicking softly as they adjust focus. "You must be the new analyst from Ossuary," she says without looking up from her work. "Good. I've been requesting additional documentation support for months." These evaluations generate enormous amounts of data. The examination room contains standard medical equipment, but your trained eye now notices details that would have escaped your attention weeks ago. The scanning devices focus specifically on skeletal structure. The blood analysis equipment emphasizes calcium and mineral levels. The physical examination protocols concentrate on bone density measurements and structural assessments. "First patient of the day," Medici Assessor Krantz announces as the chamber door slides open. A young man enters, perhaps 25 years old, with the calloused hands and muscular build of a construction worker. He moves with the easy confidence of someone in excellent physical condition, completely unaware of why he's actually here. "Jorik Hendricks," he says, presenting his identification. "Got my appointment notice last week. Says I'm due for a standard health screening." "Of course," Krantz replies smoothly, her augmetic eyes already scanning his skeletal structure through his clothing. "Just routine civic health care. The Imperium values the health and well-being of all its citizens." What follows is a masterclass in clinical deception. Every test, every measurement, every scan serves the dual purpose of maintaining the illusion of healthcare while conducting a thorough assessment of skeletal viability. The young man answers questions about his diet, exercise habits, and family medical history, never realizing that each response helps determine his value as a calcium resource. "Excellent bone density," Krantz murmurs to you, indicating readings on her scanner. "Look at these cortical thickness measurements, textbook grade A material, and those mineral absorption rates." She makes appreciative notes on her data slate. The blood work reveals optimal calcium levels, vitamin D sufficiency, and the kind of robust skeletal metabolism that comes from years of physical labor. The genetic markers indicate superior bone formation capabilities inherited from both parents. Every measurement places Jorik firmly in the most desirable classification category. "Everything looks perfect," Krantz tells him cheerfully. "You're in excellent health. We'll send the results to your local administratum office within a few days." After Jorik leaves, Krantz turns to you with an expression of professional satisfaction. "Grade A+ classification," she says, updating his file. "Estimated skeletal mass, for 2 kilograms of prime calcium. Optimal harvest viability across all bone groups." The clinical terminology cannot disguise what she's really saying. This healthy young man who entered the facility concerned about a minor cough has just been evaluated like livestock and found to be perfect for processing. "How many like him do you see per day?" you ask, though you're not sure you want to know the answer. "On average, perhaps 15 to 20 grade A classifications per shift. We process approximately 300 citizens daily at this facility alone." Her augmetic eyes click as they refocus. Of course, most citizens receive lower grades. Age, health issues, occupational damage, all factors that affect calcium quality. The next patient demonstrates her point perfectly. An elderly woman enters, her stooped posture and brittle movements immediately apparent. Krantz's scan results confirm advanced osteoporosis, previous fractures, and mineral deficiencies that place her in the grade D category. "Nothing immediately concerning," Krantz tells the woman after completing her examination. "Some minor age-related changes, but nothing that requires treatment at this time." After the woman leaves, Krantz shakes her head dismissively. "Grade D classification. suitable only for bone meal production or industrial calcium supplements. The processing facilities can still extract usable materials, but the quality is poor. Patient after patient flows through the examination chamber, each one receiving the same careful evaluation disguised as routine health care. A middle-aged factory worker with heavy metal poisoning from industrial exposure, grade C, suitable for secondary processing applications. A teenage apprentice with optimal genetic markers but still developing skeletal structure, deferred for reevaluation in 2 years when his bones reach full maturity. The art, Krantz explains as she works, lies in identifying the truly exceptional specimens. Anyone can classify obvious grade A material, but finding the hidden gems requires experience. She demonstrates with the next patient, a young woman whose slight build initially suggests mediocre classification. But Krantz's detailed scans reveal dense, highly mineralized bones with exceptional cortical thickness, the result of a genetic variation that produces superior calcium deposition. Grade A+, Krantz whispers to you, her augmetic eyes gleaming with professional excitement. Possibly even special classification. Look at these density readings. I've never seen anything quite like this. The woman, a low-level administratum clerk named Vesa, answers questions about her family medical history while Krantz takes detailed genetic samples. The scan results reveal that her entire bloodline carries markers for superior bone formation, making her not just valuable for immediate harvesting, but as a potential source of genetic material for breeding programs. Special classification. You ask after Vesa leaves. Reserved for the most exceptional specimens, Krantz explains, updating the woman's file with priority flags. These individuals don't just contribute their own skeletal materials, they're valuable for genetic preservation and enhancement programs. She leans closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. Their contributions help ensure that future generations maintain optimal calcium production capabilities. The implications of genetic breeding programs focused on bone quality make your head spin. The Imperium isn't just harvesting its current population, it's actively working to improve the skeletal characteristics of future generations to maximize calcium yields. Of course, Krantz continues, special classification individuals often receive delayed processing. Their genetic material is too valuable to waste on immediate harvesting. They might serve for years in breeding programs before their final contribution. Throughout the day, you watch the steady stream of Imperial citizens receiving what they believe to be healthcare while actually undergoing evaluation for systematic harvesting. Each person leaves with reassurances about their health, never knowing that they've just been classified like industrial materials and scheduled for processing. The beauty of the system, Krantz observes during a brief break between patients, is how it maintains social stability. Citizens genuinely believe they're receiving beneficial medical care. They leave grateful for Imperial healthcare services, never realizing the true purpose of their visit. You examine the day's statistics on your data slate. Of the 247 citizens processed, 23 received Grade A classifications, 67 Grade B, 134 Grade C, and 23 Grade D. Each classification determines not just the timing of their contribution, but the specific applications for which their bones will be used. When do they find out? You ask. How do they learn about their selection? Krantz's expression becomes even more clinical. Notification protocols vary based on local requirements and processing schedules. Some receive immediate deployment orders for special service assignments. Others might wait months or even years before their contribution is required. She consults her schedule. The important thing is maintaining optimal population ratios while ensuring steady resource supplies. As the day ends, you realize you've witnessed something far more systematic and terrifying than random death or even purposeful execution. This is the careful, scientific management of human beings as a renewable resource, complete with quality control measures, genetic optimization programs, and long-term planning strategies. The citizens you observe today will return to their lives, work their jobs, raise their families, and live normal imperial lives until the moment they receive their contribution orders. Some will have years of remaining life. Others, particularly the grade A+ classifications, might be processed within weeks. And tomorrow, Medici Assessor Krantz will examine another 300 citizens, each one unknowingly submitting to evaluation for their value as raw materials. The system never stops, never hesitates, never questions the fundamental assumption that human beings exist primarily as calcium resources waiting to be harvested. On the transport back to your facility, you stare at your own hands and wonder what classification you would receive. Your bones feel different now, not like part of your body, but like valuable materials temporarily housed in flesh that could be requisitioned at any moment for the greater good of the Imperium. The thought follows you into your dreams, where endless lines of citizens queue for evaluation while massive processing machines wait patiently in the darkness, their conveyor belts ready to transform human remains into the building blocks of civilization itself. The notification arrives on your data slate at 3:47 hours, its priority coding high enough to override your sleep cycle and activate the emergency lumens in your HAB unit. The message is brief and clinical. Report to Transport Hub Gamma 7 for field observation assignment. Priority Alpha. Departure 500 hours. You dress quickly in the darkness, your hands shaking slightly as you fasten the bone-white robes that mark you as Ossuary Division personnel. In the weeks since your assignment began, you've learned to dread these priority notifications. They usually mean you're about to witness something that will make your previous education in Imperial calcium management seem pleasant by comparison. Transport Hub Gamma 7 sits in the deepest levels of the hive's industrial sector, its massive cargo bays designed to handle the kind of bulk shipments that keep the Imperium functioning. As you approach through the service tunnels, the smell hits you first. Industrial sanitizers mixed with something organic and acrid that makes your nose burn. Administrator Vex Sturdius waits beside a massive transport vessel, its hull scarred by years of service and marked with the familiar Ossuary Division sigils. The ship's name, painted in Gothic script across its prow, reads Blessed Contribution. "Ah, excellent timing," he says, consulting his chronometer. "The morning collection run from Processing Center Alpha 9. You'll finally see how the practical side of our operation functions." The ship's cargo bay doors stand open, revealing an interior that's been modified far beyond standard Imperial transport specifications. What should be simple holding space has been transformed into something that resembles a massive medical facility crossed with an industrial processing plant. Conveyor systems snake through multiple levels, connecting examination stations, sorting areas, and what appear to be preparation chambers. Efficient design, Vex Sturdius observes, noting your expression. Every cubic meter optimized for maximum throughput while maintaining quality control standards. A stream of Imperial citizens moves through the loading area, each one carrying a small bag of personal belongings and an identification placard. They range in age from late teens to middle-aged adults, but all share certain physical characteristics, the robust build and healthy appearance that you've learned to associate with grade A calcium classifications. Voluntary reporting for special service assignments, Vex Sturdius explains, watching your reaction carefully. Each one received notification of their selection for critical Imperial duties. Quite an honor, really. You observe the citizens as they queue for processing, noting their expressions of nervous pride mixed with uncertainty. Most seem genuinely honored by their selection, though some display the kind of anxiety you'd expect from people leaving their families for dangerous service assignments. What do they think they're doing? You ask. Construction duties on frontier worlds mostly. Infrastructure development projects that require healthy, skilled workers willing to make significant sacrifices for the Imperium. Vex Sturdius checks his data slate. The recruitment briefings emphasize the critical nature of the work and the high casualty rates involved, helps prepare them psychologically for not returning home. The queue moves with surprising efficiency. Each citizen reports to a processing station where Imperial personnel verify their identification, confirm their classification status, and provide them with what appears to be standard deployment gear, simple gray uniforms, basic hygiene supplies, and ration packs for the journey. The preparation is quite thorough, Vexterdius notes approvingly. Proper nutrition during transport, medical monitoring, psychological support. The Imperium takes excellent care of its calcium resources right up until the moment of processing. One of the processing technicians approaches your observation point, her uniform bearing the insignia of the Imperial Medical Corps. Her name tag identifies her as Senior Medic Colens, and her expression carries the kind of professional detachment you've come to associate with long-term ossuary personnel. First time observing collection operations. She asks, noting your obvious discomfort. It can be challenging initially, but you'll find the systematic approach quite remarkable. She leads you through the ship's interior, explaining the various systems designed to maintain optimal conditions during transport. Climate control maintains perfect temperature and humidity for preserving calcium quality. Nutrition dispensing systems provide specialized meals designed to maximize bone mineralization during the journey. Medical monitoring equipment tracks each individual's skeletal health in real time. The average transport time to our primary processing facility is 18 days, Senior Medic Colens explains. During that period, we implement intensive calcium optimization protocols, specialized diet supplements, targeted exercise regimens, even therapeutic treatments to ensure peak bone density upon arrival. You watch as citizens receive their pre-transport medical examinations, each one more thorough than anything you witnessed at the evaluation centers. Blood chemistry analysis, bone density scans, nutritional assessments, every measurement designed to ensure optimal processing outcomes. They actually improve the calcium quality during transport. You ask, though the answer horrifies you. Substantially, she confirms. Average mineral density increases of 8–12% are typical during the journey. We've developed protocols that can enhance skeletal viability, even in previously suboptimal specimens. The citizens undergoing examination seem genuinely grateful for the medical attention, interpreting the intensive health monitoring as evidence of Imperial care for their well-being during dangerous service assignments. They joke among themselves about the thoroughness of the preparations, speculating about the harsh conditions they'll face on frontier construction projects. The psychological preparation is equally important, Senior Medic Colens continues, indicating a series of chambers where citizens receive what appears to be orientation briefing. We provide detailed information about their service assignments, emphasize the critical nature of their contributions, and ensure they understand the honor associated with their selection. Through observation windows, you watch as Imperial personnel deliver presentations about infrastructure development on hostile worlds, the dangers faced by construction crews in alien environments, and the glorious sacrifice made by those willing to serve the Imperium in its most challenging endeavors. The citizens listen with expressions of determination and pride, some taking notes on data slates provided for the briefings. Do any of them suspect? You whisper. Senior Medic Colens considers the question carefully. Some might develop concerns during the journey, questions about the destination, observations about the ship's design, uncertainty about the specific nature of their assignments. She shrugs. But by then, psychological conditioning protocols have prepared them to trust Imperial authority completely. Doubt is reframed as natural pre-deployment anxiety. The loading process continues throughout the morning, with citizens boarding in groups of 50 and being assigned to specific compartments within the ship's interior. Each compartment has been designed like comfortable barracks, complete with sleeping quarters, recreation areas, and communal spaces where people can socialize during the journey. Maintaining morale during transport is critical, Vexterdius explains. Stress hormones can negatively impact calcium quality. We've found that citizens who remain calm and optimistic throughout the journey provide superior processing outcomes. You tour one of the compartments, noting the attention to detail and creating an environment that feels more like a military deployment than transportation to systematic execution. Exercise equipment helps maintain physical condition. Entertainment systems provide distractions during the long journey. Even the meals, while designed for calcium optimization, are prepared to taste like standard Imperial rations. The ingenious aspect, Senior Medic Collins notes, is how the calcium enhancement protocols can be disguised as standard military preparation. Specialized nutrition becomes combat rations for harsh environments. Bone density monitoring becomes fitness assessments for dangerous duty. Physical conditioning becomes pre-deployment training. As the ship prepares for departure, you witness the final boarding procedures. Families gather at the loading bay barriers to bid farewell to their selected relatives, many expressing pride in their loved one's selection for critical Imperial service. Children wave proudly at parents they'll never see again. Spouses share tearful embraces while promising to maintain the household until their partners return. The family support programs are quite comprehensive, Vexterdius mentions, observing the farewell scenes. Survivor benefits, community recognition ceremonies, commemorative services when construction projects are completed, helps maintain social stability and ensures continued cooperation with selection protocols. The blessed contribution seals its cargo bays with a massive hydraulic hiss, its interior now containing 2,847 Imperial citizens who believe they're departing for dangerous but honorable service assignments. The ship's engines rumble to life, preparing to transport its human cargo to Processing Center Alpha 9, where industrial machinery waits to transform them into the calcium compounds that keep the Imperium functioning. Estimated processing yield from this shipment. You ask, though the question makes you nauseous. Vexterdius consults his data slate, scrolling through calculations and quality assessments. Approximately 3 tons of grade A calcium materials, plus secondary products suitable for industrial applications. The transport protocols should enhance those figures by 8–10%. He looks up from his calculations. An excellent return on investment in terms of collection and transportation costs. As the ship disappears into the hive's departure tubes, you realize you've witnessed something far more horrifying than simple mass murder. This is systematic deception on an industrial scale, transforming willing volunteers into raw materials while maintaining their cooperation through elaborate psychological manipulation. The citizens aboard the blessed contribution will spend the next 18 days believing they're heroes serving the Imperium in its most critical endeavors. They'll exercise to maintain their fitness for dangerous construction work. They'll eat specialized meals to prepare for harsh environmental conditions. They'll undergo medical monitoring to ensure their readiness for frontier service. And when they arrive at Processing Center Alpha 9, they'll learn the truth about their service assignment only in the final moments before massive industrial machinery reduces them to component elements. The next collection run departs tomorrow morning. Vexterdius informs you as you return to the administrative levels. Similar numbers, though we're expecting higher quality classifications from the Hive Primus selection protocols. Tomorrow, another 3,000 Imperial citizens will board transport ships believing they're answering the call to serve humanity's greatest empire. They'll bid farewell to their families with pride, undergo medical preparation with gratitude, and spend weeks in transit preparing for construction duties that will never come. The system's efficiency isn't just mechanical, it's psychological, transforming victims into willing participants while maintaining the social structures that make large-scale harvesting possible. The Imperium doesn't just take its citizens' bones. It convinces them to volunteer for the honor of contributing their calcium to humanity's survival. As you process the day's documentation, updating shipping manifests and quality projections, you can't escape the knowledge that somewhere in the void, the blessed contribution continues its journey toward Processing Center Alpha 9. Its cargo bay contains nearly 3,000 people who still believe they're heroes, even as massive industrial machinery prepares to receive them. The conveyors are already running, waiting for the next shipment of willing volunteers. 6 weeks into your assignment with the Ossuary Division, Administrator Vexterdius presents you with what he describes as the crown jewel of your education, a comprehensive tour of Imperial facilities that utilize processed human calcium in their operations. The data slate he hands you contains clearance codes for sites you didn't know existed, each one representing a different application of the materials you've been tracking through shipping manifests and quality assessments. Today you'll understand why this work matters, he says, his pale eyes gleaming with something approaching religious fervor. Today you'll see the Imperium's calcium management program in its full glory. Your first destination is the Cathedral of St. Macarius, a massive structure in the hive's upper levels that serves as the primary worship site for nearly 2 million Imperial citizens. The cathedral's architect, a man named Constructus Valdez, meets you at the main entrance with the enthusiasm of someone eager to discuss his masterwork. 15 years of construction, he says, gesturing toward the soaring spires and massive buttresses that support the structure. And every gram of calcium compound sourced from Imperial citizens who gave their lives in service to the Emperor. The scale of the cathedral is overwhelming, its vaulted ceilings disappearing into shadows hundreds of meters above. But as Constructus Valdez explains the building techniques, you begin to understand the true scope of what you're witnessing. The primary load-bearing elements utilize compressed bone aggregate, he says, running his hand along a massive pillar that stretches from floor to ceiling. Approximately 40,000 tons of processed human calcium, mixed with binding agents and formed under extreme pressure. The resulting material is stronger than standard rockcrete and carries the spiritual essence of those who contributed to its creation. 40,000 tons. The number reverberates in your mind as you consider its implications. Even assuming optimal processing yields, that single pillar represents the skeletal remains of hundreds of thousands of Imperial citizens, all compressed into building material and sanctified through religious ceremony. The acoustics are remarkable, Constructus Valdez continues, leading you deeper into the cathedral's interior. Human bone has unique resonance properties. When the faithful sing their hymns, they're literally surrounded by the physical remains of their predecessors, creating a harmony that synthetic materials simply cannot replicate. You test his claim by speaking aloud, noting how your voice carries differently in this space. There's something organic about the sound, a warmth and depth that you've never experienced in structures built from standard materials. The realization that this acoustic quality comes from compressed human remains makes your skin crawl. The altar itself, Constructus Valdez says, approaching the cathedral's focal point with obvious reverence, represents our finest work, pure grade A calcium, processed from individuals who specifically volunteered for sacred applications. The altar is a masterpiece of carved bone-white material, its surface inlaid with intricate designs that seem to glow in the cathedral's filtered light. Upon closer inspection, you realize that the decorative patterns aren't carved at all. They're the natural grain and texture of compressed bone matter, carefully selected and arranged to create religious imagery. Special classification individuals, Constructus Valdez explains, noting your fascination with the altar's surface. Their calcium possessed exceptional spiritual purity. Processing their remains required specialized techniques to preserve the blessed qualities of their bone material. You reach out to touch the altar's surface, then pull your hand back as you realize what you're actually considering. This isn't stone or metal or synthetic material. It's the compressed skeletal remains of people who were classified as spiritually superior and processed specifically for religious applications. How many? You whisper. How many people are in this altar? Constructus Valdez consults a data slate filled with construction specifications. The altar assembly utilized calcium from 1,247 special classification individuals, selected for optimal spiritual purity and bone quality. Each one underwent specialized preparation rituals before processing to ensure their blessed essence remained intact throughout the construction process. The tour continues through other sections of the cathedral, each one revealing new applications of human calcium in sacred architecture. The communion rails are made from bone meal mixed with precious metals, creating a material that's both beautiful and spiritually significant. The holy water fonts utilize calcium compounds that slowly dissolve when contacted by blessed liquids, symbolically joining the faithful with their processed predecessors. The windows present our greatest technical achievement, Constructus Valdez says, indicating the massive stained glass installations that bathe the cathedral in colored light. Standard glass production utilizes limestone for calcium content, but we developed techniques for incorporating human bone calcium directly into the glass matrix. The stained glass windows tell stories of imperial saints and heroes, their images rendered in brilliant colors that seem to pulse with inner light. But knowing that the glass itself contains processed human remains transforms their beauty into something horrifying. Every ray of colored light that illuminates the cathedral's interior passes through materials made from the bones of the faithful. Your next stop is a Forge World facility that demonstrates the industrial applications of processed calcium. Chief Engineer Corex greets you in a massive production facility where human bone derivatives are incorporated into specialized manufacturing processes. Military applications, primarily, he explains, leading you past enormous vats of bubbling compounds. Human calcium possesses unique properties that make it invaluable for certain types of ammunition production. The facility produces specialized bolter rounds for Space Marine chapters, each one incorporating calcium compounds derived from processed human bones. Chief Engineer Corex explains that these additives improve the ammunition's penetration capabilities, while also providing spiritual protection against demonic influences. The machine spirits approve of human-derived materials, he says, patting one of the massive production machines with obvious affection. They recognize the sacrifice inherent in these compounds and bless our manufacturing processes accordingly. You watch as thousands of bolter rounds roll off production lines, each one containing trace amounts of human calcium that will eventually be fired in battles across the galaxy. The bullets will carry the physical essence of processed Imperial citizens into combat, literally transforming human sacrifice into weapons against the Imperium's enemies. Armor applications represent an even more significant use. Chief Engineer Corax continues, leading you to another section of the facility. Power armor and vehicle plating benefit enormously from calcium-enhanced alloys. The production line here creates armor segments for Imperial Guard vehicles, each one incorporating bone-derived compounds that improve durability and provide spiritual protection. Chief Engineer Corax shows you test results demonstrating that calcium-enhanced armor performs 23% better against enemy fire than standard materials. The calcium creates microscopic crystalline structures within the metal matrix, he explains, pointing to magnified images of the alloy's internal structure. These formations distribute impact energy more effectively, while also serving as focal points for the Emperor's blessing. Your final stop is an agri-world processing station, where human bone meal is incorporated into livestock feed and soil conditioning programs. Agricultural Supervisor Hendren explains the process with the kind of technical enthusiasm you've learned to expect from Imperial specialists. Calcium bioavailability is critical for optimal crop yields, she says, walking through vast fields where grain grows in soil enriched with processed human remains. Human bone meal provides mineral compositions that perfectly match the nutritional requirements of imperial food crops. The fields stretch to the horizon, their grain swaying in artificial wind generated by massive atmospheric processors. Knowing that the soil beneath your feet has been enriched with human calcium transforms the pastoral scene into something nightmarish. Every plant growing in these fields has drawn nutrients from processed human bones. Livestock applications are equally impressive. Agricultural Supervisor Hendren continues, leading you to massive breeding facilities where cattle and poultry are raised on feed supplemented with human bone meal. The calcium enhances both meat quality and milk production, creating food products with superior nutritional profiles. You watch as thousands of animals consume feed that contains processed human remains, their bodies incorporating the calcium into their own bones and tissues. When these animals are eventually slaughtered for food, they'll carry trace amounts of human-derived minerals into the imperial food supply, creating a cycle where processed citizens become part of the diet of living ones. The efficiency is remarkable, Agricultural Supervisor Hendren observes. Nothing is wasted in the imperial system. Human calcium that isn't suitable for construction or manufacturing applications finds use in agricultural programs, ensuring maximum utilization of all processed materials. As your tour concludes, you realize you've witnessed the complete life cycle of imperial calcium management. Human citizens are evaluated, selected, transported, and processed into raw materials that become the physical foundation of imperial civilization itself. The buildings where people worship are made from the bones of their predecessors. The ammunition that protects them incorporates calcium from processed citizens. Even the food they eat contains trace amounts of human remains. The beauty of the system, Administrator Vexterdius reflects as you return to the administrative complex, lies in its completeness. Every aspect of imperial life benefits from human calcium applications. Citizens quite literally become part of the civilization they serve, their sacrifice transformed into the physical infrastructure that sustains future generations. The implications settle over you like a shroud. In the grim darkness of the 41st millennium, death isn't just the end of individual existence, it's the beginning of transformation into something larger. The Imperium doesn't just demand loyalty from its citizens, it eventually incorporates their physical essence into its very structure. You look around the bone-white corridors of the Ossuary Division complex with new understanding. These walls aren't just built from processed human calcium, they're monuments to the systematic transformation of people into building materials. Every surface you touch, every fixture you use, every system that keeps you alive has been constructed from the compressed remains of imperial citizens who once walked these same halls. The lumens flicker overhead, casting shadows through fixtures made from human bone. The air filtration systems hum quietly, their calcium-enhanced components purifying the atmosphere you breathe. Even the furniture supporting you has been manufactured using compounds derived from processed human remains. You are living and working inside a structure that is literally composed of the dead, surrounded by the physical essence of countless imperial citizens who were evaluated, selected, transported, and processed into raw materials. And tomorrow, new shipments will arrive, carrying fresh calcium resources that will become tomorrow's building materials, ammunition, agricultural supplements, and sacred objects. The system never stops, never rests, never questions the fundamental assumption that human beings exist primarily as calcium resources waiting to be transformed into the physical infrastructure of civilization itself. In the grim darkness of the far future, there is no death, only recycling. The revelation comes during your 7th week with the Ossuary Division, delivered through a conversation you weren't meant to overhear. You're working late in the Data Analysis Center when voices carry from Administrator Vexterdius's office. A discussion between him and someone whose clearance level apparently exceeds your own. Population compliance rates in Sector Solar have dropped to 78%, the unfamiliar voice says. Citizens are beginning to develop survival strategies that interfere with selection protocols. Inevitable, really, Vexterdius replies. Once knowledge of the calcium management program spreads beyond authorized personnel, behavioral adaptations are bound to emerge. You freeze at your workstation, suddenly understanding that there are Imperial citizens who know the truth about the bone harvesting system, and more importantly, that they're actively trying to avoid selection. The next morning, Administrator Vexterdius assigns you to what he terms social impact assessment, field research into how knowledge of calcium harvesting affects daily life in Imperial communities. Your destination is sublevel 47 of Hive Tertius, a residential district that supposedly shows anomalous demographic patterns in recent selection cycles. The transport to sublevel 47 takes you through parts of the hive you've never seen before, residential corridors lined with HAB units where millions of Imperial citizens live out their daily lives in the shadow of systematic bone harvesting. The atmosphere here feels different from the clinical sterility of the administrative levels. There's an undercurrent of tension, a watchfulness in people's expressions that speaks to knowledge they shouldn't possess. Your guide is Social Compliance Officer Yazek, a thin man whose job involves monitoring population behavior for signs of calcium avoidance activities, a euphemism that makes your skin crawl. He briefs you as you walk through the sublevel's main thoroughfares, pointing out behavioral patterns that most observers would miss. Notice how citizens avoid making eye contact with anyone wearing medical insignia, he says, indicating a group of residents who suddenly change direction when they spot a Medikey servitor in the distance. Classic avoidance behavior. They've learned to associate medical personnel with selection protocols. The fear is subtle but pervasive. Citizens move through their daily routines with an undercurrent of constant anxiety, always aware that their next interaction with Imperial authorities might result in evaluation for calcium harvesting. Children play quietly, their parents having taught them that drawing attention could lead to family selection for special service. The black market activity is particularly interesting, Officer Yazek continues, leading you into a commercial area where vendors sell food, clothing, and household goods. Citizens have developed sophisticated networks for obtaining calcium supplements and bone-strengthening treatments. He points out vendors whose stalls contain unusually large quantities of milk products, bone meal supplements, and dietary additives rich in calcium and vitamin D. These merchants operate with the kind of nervous alertness you associate with illegal activity, constantly watching for signs of Imperial scrutiny. The theory, Officer Yazek explains, is that citizens believe they can avoid selection by artificially improving their bone quality beyond grade A standards. They think exceptional calcium density might make them too valuable to harvest immediately. The irony is horrifying. Citizens are unknowingly making themselves more valuable as calcium resources while believing they're protecting themselves from selection. Their desperate attempts at self-preservation actually optimize them for processing, like cattle feeding themselves to improve their meat quality. Does it work? You ask, though you already suspect the answer. Sometimes, temporarily, Officer Yazek admits. Citizens with artificially enhanced bone density might receive special classification status, which delays their processing while their genetic material is evaluated for breeding programs. His expression becomes clinical. Of course, special classification individuals eventually contribute their calcium after their genetic value has been maximized. You observe citizens engaged in the complex calculations of survival under systematic harvesting. Families huddle together, whispering about relatives who received special service notifications. Parents feed their children calcium supplements while simultaneously hoping the treatments won't make them too attractive to Imperial selectors. The family dynamics are particularly complex, Officer Yazek notes, indicating a group of citizens gathered around a vendor selling bone density testing equipment. Parents face impossible choices. Do they try to protect their children through calcium enhancement, knowing it might make them targets? Or do they deliberately allow nutritional deficiencies, hoping lower bone quality will provide protection? The testing equipment allows families to monitor their own calcium levels, giving them some illusion of control over their fate. But the technology also creates new anxieties. As citizens obsess over bone density readings and mineral absorption, rates that determine their value as raw materials. "Look at this," Officer Yazek says, pointing to a bulletin board covered with missing person notices. Official records list these individuals as deployed for critical infrastructure assignments, but the families know better. The missing person notices tell a heartbreaking story of systematic deception. Photographs of healthy young adults are accompanied by messages from families asking for information about their deployed relatives. Some notices have been posted for months, their edges worn by desperate hands that continue to hope for word from loved ones who will never return. The families develop elaborate justification systems, Officer Yazek explains. They convince themselves that their relatives really are serving on dangerous construction projects, that the high casualty rates explain the lack of communication. He points to one particular notice, a young woman whose family has posted increasingly desperate messages over several months. This one's been classified and processed for 3 months now, but her parents still maintain hope for her return. The psychological mechanisms that allow families to cope with systematic harvesting are as complex as they are heartbreaking. Grief becomes patriotic duty. Loss becomes sacrifice for the greater good. The absence of loved ones becomes evidence of their exceptional service to the Imperium. You encounter a support group meeting in a small community center, where families of deployed citizens gather to share their experiences and maintain hope for their relatives' return. The facilitator, an elderly woman named Sidisnes Korak, leads discussions about maintaining faith during separation and supporting the Imperium's critical infrastructure projects. Sister Hendrix's son has been serving for 8 months now, Sidisnes Korak announces to the group. No communication yet, but that's typical for deep frontier assignments. We must trust that he's making vital contributions to humanity's expansion. The woman she references, Sister Hendrix, nods with forced conviction, though her eyes carry the kind of hollow desperation you see in people clinging to impossible hope. Her son was almost certainly processed months ago, his bones contributing to the endless calcium requirements of Imperial infrastructure, but she maintains the fiction that he's building settlements on hostile worlds. My daughter volunteered for special classification service, another woman shares, her voice carrying pride mixed with barely concealed terror. They said her genetic markers were exceptional, that she'd be contributing to humanity's future in the most important ways possible. The group responds with murmurs of congratulation and support, never acknowledging that special classification service means breeding programs designed to optimize future generations for calcium production. The woman's daughter is alive, at least for now, but her genetic material is being harvested to create children whose bones will be even more valuable for Imperial applications. The community support systems are remarkably sophisticated, Officer Yazek observes as you leave the meeting. Citizens develop elaborate social structures to cope with systematic losses, while maintaining the fiction that their relatives are serving heroically rather than being processed for raw materials. The coping mechanisms extend beyond denial into active resistance, though the resistance itself is often futile. You observe families attempting to hide relatives who have received selection notifications, moving them to different hive levels, or changing their identification records to avoid calcium assessment protocols. The hiding operations rarely succeed, Officer Yazek explains, indicating surveillance equipment that monitors citizen movement throughout the hive. Our tracking systems are designed to locate individuals regardless of their attempts at concealment. He points to data streams on his slate showing the real-time locations of thousands of citizens. But the attempts at concealment serve useful purposes. They help identify family networks and social connections that might indicate broader compliance issues. Even failed resistance provides valuable intelligence for Imperial authorities, allowing them to map social structures and identify potential sources of organized opposition to calcium harvesting programs. Citizens who try to protect their families inadvertently reveal information that makes future selections more efficient. The most heartbreaking cases involve citizens who voluntarily present themselves for processing to protect family members from selection. Officer Yazek shows you records of individuals who discovered their relatives had been chosen for calcium harvesting and offered themselves as substitutes. The voluntary contribution rates have increased significantly, he notes, scrolling through sacrifice notifications on his data slate. Citizens who understand the system's requirements often choose to contribute their calcium proactively rather than risk having family members selected through standard protocols. The mathematics of family survival under systematic harvesting create impossible moral calculations. Parents sacrifice themselves to protect children who will eventually face the same selection process. Siblings volunteer for processing to save relatives who might be chosen later anyway. The system transforms love itself into a mechanism for optimizing calcium collection. The breeding program participants present unique psychological challenges. Officer Yazek continues, accessing classified files that detail the experiences of special classification individuals. They understand that their genetic material is valuable, but they also know that their eventual processing is inevitable. Women in the breeding programs live with the knowledge that their children are being optimized for future calcium harvesting, their genetic lines preserved specifically to create more valuable skeletal resources. They raise children knowing that superior bone quality, the very trait that makes their genetic material valuable, will eventually doom their offspring to processing. The program participants often develop complex philosophical frameworks to justify their cooperation, Officer Yazek explains. They convince themselves that contributing to humanity's genetic improvement is noble, that their children will serve the Imperium in the most important ways possible. The philosophical frameworks are as elaborate as they are tragic. Women in breeding programs convince themselves that creating children with superior bone quality is a form of motherhood that transcends individual survival. They take pride in genetic traits that will make their children more valuable as calcium resources, transforming maternal instincts into mechanisms for optimizing harvesting operations. As your field research concludes, you realize you've witnessed something far more complex than simple oppression or even systematic murder. This is the complete transformation of human society to support industrial-scale calcium harvesting, creating social structures where love, family bonds, and community support all ultimately serve the purpose of optimizing bone collection. Citizens develop elaborate coping mechanisms that allow them to function, while knowing their bodies are valued primarily as calcium resources. Families maintain hope for relatives who will never return while simultaneously preparing for their own eventual processing. Communities create support systems that help people adapt to living under systematic harvesting while maintaining the social stability necessary for continued operations. The most horrifying aspect isn't the scale of the killing, it's how thoroughly the system has transformed human relationships to serve its purposes. Love becomes sacrifice. Hope becomes cooperation. Family bonds become mechanisms for optimizing calcium collection. Even resistance ultimately provides intelligence that makes the system more efficient. In the grim darkness of the far future, humanity hasn't just accepted systematic cannibalization. It has evolved social structures that transform this horror into expressions of devotion, sacrifice, and love. Citizens don't just submit to calcium harvesting. They compete to offer their bones more willingly, believing that voluntary contribution demonstrates superior loyalty to the Imperium. The system doesn't require force because it has convinced its victims that being processed for raw materials is the highest form of service they can provide. In a universe where human bones have become the foundation of civilization itself, offering your calcium to the Imperium isn't death. It's the ultimate expression of faith. The summons arrives 3 months into your assignment, bearing security clearances you didn't know existed and authorizing access to information classified beyond your previous comprehension. Administrator Vexterdius personally delivers the notification, his pale eyes carrying an excitement you've never seen before. "Congratulations," he says, his voice barely above a whisper. "You've been selected for Omega-level briefing protocols. Today you'll learn why everything we do matters. Today you'll understand the true purpose behind the Imperium's calcium management operations." The transport to the briefing facility takes you deeper into the hive's core than you've ever traveled, through security checkpoints that scan not just your identification, but your genetic markers, psychological profiles, and even calcium density ratings. The guards at each checkpoint carry weapons you don't recognize, and their insignia bears symbols that make your eyes water when you try to focus on them. The information you're about to receive, Vexterdius explains as massive blast doors seal behind you, is classified at levels that require significant psychological preparation. Some individuals don't handle the revelation well. The briefing chamber sits at the absolute center of the facility, its walls lined with materials that seem to absorb sound and light. The air here tastes different, metallic and sharp, with an underlying sweetness that reminds you of bone meal. At the chamber's center sits a single desk with 2 chairs and a data slate bearing the highest security classifications you've ever seen. "Please sit," Vexterdius says, his voice carrying a reverence usually reserved for religious ceremonies. "What I'm about to show you will change everything you thought you knew about the Imperium, about humanity, and about the price of our survival." The data slate activates with biometric confirmation from both of you, its screen displaying the familiar Aquila symbol before transitioning to text that makes your hands shake as you read. Classification level: Omega Absolute Authorized Recipients. 1,000 Imperial personnel penalty for unauthorized disclosure. Immediate processing. Operation: Eternal Sustenance Primary Objective. Calcium Supplementation for Golden Throne Life Support SYSTEMS Secondary Objective. Maintenance of Imperial Sovereign's Physical Matrix. The words blur before your eyes as their meaning penetrates your consciousness. The Golden Throne, the Emperor himself. Every bone you've processed, every shipment you've tracked, every citizen you've watched disappear into the calcium harvesting system, all of it serves a single, unthinkable purpose. The Emperor's physical form, Vexterdius explains, his voice carrying the tone of someone revealing sacred mysteries, has been sustained for 10,000 years through the most advanced life support technology in human history. But even the Golden Throne has limitations. The data slate displays technical specifications that make your mind reel. Calcium depletion rates measured in tons per day. Skeletal matrix degradation that requires constant supplementation. Bone density maintenance protocols that consume the processed remains of 50,000 human beings every 24 hours. His body, Vexterdius continues, is quite literally held together by the calcium extracted from his faithful subjects. Every day, the Golden Throne processes approximately 200 tons of human-derived calcium compounds and integrates them directly into the Emperor's skeletal structure. 200 tons, every day, for 10,000 years. The mathematics of divinity spread across your consciousness like a plague, revealing calculations that transform the entire scope of imperial calcium harvesting from industrial necessity into sacred duty. The daily requirements, the data slate explains in clinical detail, necessitate the systematic processing of 50,237 human skeletal systems per standard Terran cycle. This calcium is refined through specialized techniques that preserve the spiritual essence of willing sacrifice, while maximizing bioavailability for Golden Throne integration systems. 50,000 people, every single day. Their bones extracted, processed, refined, and fed directly into the machinery that keeps humanity's God Emperor from crumbling into dust. The shipping manifests you've been processing suddenly take on horrifying new meaning. They're not just supply chains for construction materials or ammunition components. They're feeding schedules for a divine being whose continued existence requires the daily consumption of human calcium on an industrial scale. The process is quite sophisticated, Vexterdius explains, calling up technical diagrams that show the Golden Throne's internal structure. The calcium is not simply added to the Emperor's physical form. It's integrated at the molecular level through psychic processes that bond the spiritual essence of the processed individuals with his divine consciousness. The diagrams reveal machinery of impossible complexity, with calcium processing chambers that can refine human bone into compounds compatible with 10,000-year-old tissue. Injection systems snake throughout the Golden Throne like veins, carrying their liquid cargo of processed human remains directly into the Emperor's skeletal system. Every person who contributes their calcium to this sacred process, Vexterdius continues, becomes part of the Emperor himself. Their bones join his bones. Their sacrifice becomes his strength. Their faith literally holds his physical form together. The horror and beauty of the revelation war in your mind. Every citizen you've watched disappear into the calcium harvesting system hasn't just died. They've been transformed into component elements of humanity's greatest protector. Their bones now exist within the Golden Throne, supporting the physical form of the being who guards mankind against the terrors of the warp. The Custodian Guard, the data slate reveals, maintains specialized facilities beneath the Imperial Palace dedicated solely to calcium processing operations. These installations represent the most sacred manufacturing complexes in human space, where the bones of the faithful are transformed into the literal substance of divinity. The specifications describe processing facilities that dwarf anything you've witnessed in your previous assignments. Calcium refinement plants that can handle millions of tons of human remains annually. Purification systems that remove every trace of impurity while preserving the spiritual essence of sacrifice. Integration chambers where processed calcium is prepared for direct injection into the Emperor's increasingly fragile skeletal system. The tragedy, Vexterdius says, his voice carrying genuine sorrow, is that the Emperor's condition continues to deteriorate despite our efforts. The daily calcium requirements increase every year as his ancient bones struggle to maintain structural integrity. The data shows escalating consumption rates stretching back centuries. What began as a few thousand human skeletons per day during the early years of his internment has grown into the massive harvesting operations you've been supporting. And the projections for future requirements paint a picture of ever-increasing calcium demands that will eventually require processing significant percentages of the imperial population. Current projections suggest that calcium requirements will reach 100,000 human skeletal systems per day within the next millennium, the data slate reveals. Long-term sustainability models indicate that up to 15% of the imperial population may eventually require annual processing to meet divine nutritional needs. 15%. The number hangs in the air like a death sentence for billions of imperial citizens whose bones haven't yet been harvested. The systematic processing you've been supporting isn't just current necessity, It's a growing requirement that will eventually consume substantial portions of humanity itself. The genetic optimization programs, Vexterdius explains, calling up breeding protocols that make your stomach clench, represent our attempts to improve calcium production efficiency. By enhancing human bone quality and density through selective breeding, we can potentially reduce the number of individuals required for daily processing. The breeding programs you witnessed earlier take on new meaning as part of a systematic effort to optimize human beings for more efficient calcium extraction. Women in special classification programs aren't just producing children with superior bone quality. They're creating future generations whose skeletal systems will provide more calcium per individual processed. The Adeptus Mechanicus has developed enhancement techniques, the data continues, that can increase individual calcium yields by up to 400% through specialized dietary protocols and genetic modification. These improvements may eventually reduce daily processing requirements to manageable levels. Even genetic modification serves the ultimate purpose of feeding human calcium to the Emperor's dying body. The Imperium isn't just harvesting its current population, it's actively working to improve future generations' value as calcium resources, transforming humanity itself into a more efficient food source for divine preservation. The most remarkable aspect, Vexterdius observes, is how willingly citizens would contribute if they understood the true purpose of their sacrifice. Knowing that their bones will literally become part of the Emperor's physical form, that their calcium will help sustain humanity's greatest protector, this knowledge would transform processing from duty into the highest honor imaginable. The psychological profiles included in the briefing support his assertion. Test subjects who learned the truth about calcium harvesting's purpose showed dramatic increases in voluntary contribution rates. Citizens who understood that their bones would join the Emperor's skeletal system competed for processing opportunities, viewing transformation into divine building materials as the ultimate expression of faith. Why keep it secret? You ask, though the question feels dangerous even as you speak it. Social stability, Vexterdius replies immediately. If the entire imperial population understood that the Emperor requires daily consumption of 50,000 human skeletons, several potential problems would emerge. Panic about selection odds, despair over humanity's long-term survival, religious schisms between those who view the requirement as divine necessity versus those who see it as evidence of the Emperor's failing divinity. The briefing documents detail extensive psychological modeling that shows how knowledge of the Emperor's calcium requirements would affect different segments of imperial society. Some populations would embrace voluntary processing as sacred duty. Others would revolt against a system that transforms their god emperor into a cannibal deity, consuming his own worshippers. The current system, Vexterdius continues, maintains optimal processing rates while preserving social stability. Citizens contribute their calcium through systematic harvesting operations that maintain the fiction of construction duties or military service, while the true purpose remains known only to those with appropriate clearance levels. As the briefing concludes, you realize you've learned the ultimate truth about human existence in the 41st millennium. Every person in the Imperium serves two functions. They provide faith and devotion during life, then provide calcium and skeletal materials after death. The Emperor's continued existence requires both psychological energy from his worshippers and physical materials from their processed remains. The beauty of the system, Vexterdius reflects as you prepare to leave the briefing chamber, is how it transforms necessary horror into sacred duty. The Emperor doesn't just protect humanity, he literally incorporates humanity into his divine form, making every processed citizen part of the eternal struggle against chaos. The data slate powers down, its screens returning to neutral gray as the security systems prepare to erase your access to information that could shatter civilizations. But the knowledge remains, burning in your consciousness like acid. Every citizen you've processed, Every shipping manifest you've tracked, every calcium quota you've calculated serves the single purpose of feeding human bones to a dying god emperor whose continued existence depends on consuming his own faithful. The emperor of mankind, humanity's greatest protector and most revered deity, survives by eating the processed skeletal remains of 50,000 worshippers every day. The Golden Throne isn't just a life support system. It's a feeding apparatus that transforms human bones into divine sustenance, maintaining the physical form of a being whose consciousness guards humanity against the horrors of the warp. And you are part of the system that keeps him fed. As you return to your normal duties, processing shipping manifests and managing calcium quotas, every number takes on new meaning. Each transport ship carries raw materials for divinity. Each processing facility transforms worshippers into divine nutrients. Each citizen selected for calcium harvesting joins their physical essence with the Emperor's own skeletal system. In the grim darkness of the far future, humanity's greatest hero survives by consuming the bones of his faithful, transforming love and devotion into literal divine nutrition. The Imperium doesn't just demand faith from its citizens. It eventually requires their calcium, processed and refined into the building blocks that hold together the Emperor's 10,000-year-old skeleton. The Golden Throne pulses with the heartbeat of a dying god, its chambers filled with liquid calcium extracted from millions of processed human beings. And somewhere in the depths of Terra's most sacred vaults, massive conveyor systems carry their daily cargo of human bones toward processing facilities that will transform them into the substance of divinity itself. 50,000 skeletons today, 50,000 more tomorrow, forever. In the quiet hours after your Omega-level briefing, as you sit alone in your HAB unit staring at walls you now know are built from compressed human bones, the full weight of revelation settles over your consciousness like a burial shroud. Every surface around you contains the processed remains of Imperial citizens. Every breath you take passes through air filtration systems constructed from calcium, extracted from human skeletons. Even the furniture supporting your body has been manufactured using compounds derived from the bones of the faithful. You are living inside a tomb that houses the living, surrounded by the physical essence of countless individuals who were evaluated, selected, transported, and processed into the raw materials that define your existence. And somewhere beneath Terra's surface, the Golden Throne continues its eternal function, consuming the skeletal remains of 50,000 human beings every day to maintain the Emperor's failing physical form. The mathematics are inescapable. If current consumption rates continue unchanged, the Emperor's calcium requirements will eventually necessitate processing significant portions of the Imperial population annually. The genetic optimization programs may improve efficiency, but they cannot eliminate the fundamental reality. Humanity's God Emperor survives by consuming the bones of his worshippers, and his appetite grows stronger every year. You attempt to calculate the long-term implications, though the numbers make your mind reel. The Imperium contains approximately 1 million worlds, each supporting populations that range from millions to hundreds of billions. Even assuming optimal efficiency improvements through genetic enhancement and processing optimization, the Emperor's growing calcium needs will eventually require systematic harvesting of substantial percentages of humanity itself. 10,000 years of divinity have come at a price measured in human skeletons, and that price increases with every passing century. The shipping manifests you process today represent current consumption rates, but the projections you've seen paint a picture of escalating requirements that could eventually transform the entire Imperium into a calcium farming operation designed to feed its dying god emperor. What does it mean to be human when your primary value lies in your skeletal system's mineral content? What becomes of human dignity when individual worth is measured in terms of calcium density and bone quality ratings? How do we maintain meaning and purpose in a universe that treats conscious beings as raw materials temporarily housed in flesh. The citizens you've observed, those who know the truth about calcium harvesting, have developed complex psychological frameworks to cope with these questions. They convince themselves that voluntary processing represents the highest form of service to the Imperium. They take pride in bone quality ratings that determine their value as raw materials. They compete for the honor of contributing their calcium to humanity's most sacred purposes. But beneath these coping mechanisms lies a more fundamental transformation in what it means to be human. Citizens don't just accept systematic cannibalization. They embrace it as expression of faith, devotion, and love. Mothers in breeding programs take pride in producing children with superior bone quality, knowing that these same traits make their offspring more valuable for eventual processing. Families maintain hope for deployed relatives while simultaneously preparing for their own selection. The system has achieved something far more sophisticated than simple oppression or even efficient resource extraction. It has transformed human nature itself, creating social structures where love, family bonds, and community support all ultimately serve the purpose of optimizing calcium collection for divine consumption. Consider the theological implications. The Emperor of mankind, revered as humanity's greatest protector and most perfect being, maintains his existence through systematic consumption of his own worshippers. Every prayer offered in his name rises from lips belonging to potential calcium resources. Every act of devotion performed in his honor comes from individuals whose bones may eventually join his skeletal system. The Imperium's greatest hero has become its most efficient predator, requiring daily sacrifice of 50,000 human lives to maintain his protective function. The being who guards humanity against the horrors of chaos survives by consuming humanity itself, transforming worshippers into divine nutrients through industrial processing operations of unimaginable scale. Yet the system works. The Emperor continues to exist, his psychic presence holding back the forces of chaos that would otherwise consume humanity entirely. The Golden Throne functions, powered by calcium extracted from processed human bones and maintained by the sacrifice of citizens who believe their contributions serve the greater good. Perhaps this is the true horror of the 41st millennium, not that the system is evil, but that it may be necessary. In a universe where humanity faces extinction from alien invaders, demonic corruption, and its own violent nature, the systematic processing of human beings into divine nutrients might represent the only viable path to species survival. The Emperor's calcium requirements aren't arbitrary consumption. They are the price of maintaining psychic barriers that protect humanity from chaos incursion. Every processed skeleton becomes part of the divine consciousness that guides the Astronomicon, coordinates imperial defenses, and holds together the fragile infrastructure of human civilization across the galaxy. Without this systematic sacrifice, the Emperor's physical form would deteriorate beyond the Golden Throne's ability to sustain it. His consciousness would fade from the material universe, leaving humanity defenseless against the predators that stalk the warp. The calcium extracted from processed citizens literally holds together the being whose existence preserves human civilization from extinction. The citizens who volunteer for processing understand this truth intuitively, even if they don't possess your classified knowledge. They recognize that their individual survival means nothing compared to humanity's continued existence, that their personal calcium represents a contribution to something far greater than themselves. The families who support the systematic processing of their relatives, the communities that maintain hope for deployed citizens, the individuals who compete for the honor of contributing their bones to imperial purposes, all of them participate in a social structure that transforms necessary horror into sacred duty. But what becomes of human worth when survival requires systematic cannibalization? What happens to individual dignity when consciousness exists primarily to produce calcium for divine consumption? How do we measure the value of life when death becomes the ultimate service to humanity's continued existence? The answer may lie in transformation rather than preservation. The citizens processed for calcium harvesting don't simply die. They become part of something eternal and divine. Their bones join the Emperor's skeletal system. Their sacrifice becomes his strength. Their individual faith contributes to the cosmic consciousness that protects humanity from extinction. In a universe where individual death is inevitable and usually meaningless, the calcium harvesting system offers genuine transcendence. Processed citizens achieve a form of immortality by becoming part of the Emperor's physical form, their bones contributing to divine protection that will last for millennia beyond their natural lifespans. Perhaps the true horror lies not in the systematic processing of human beings, but in the possibility that this represents humanity's highest achievement. The ability to transform individual sacrifice into collective survival, to convert personal death into eternal protection, to unite the living and the dead in service to species preservation. These accomplishments might represent the pinnacle of human evolution. The Imperium has achieved something unprecedented in galactic history: the systematic conversion of biological resources into divine sustenance, creating a sustainable cycle where human calcium becomes the literal foundation of cosmic protection. The processed citizens don't just die for their beliefs. They become part of the divine consciousness that validates those beliefs through continued existence. Yet questions remain that no amount of theological justification can answer. Is a humanity that survives through systematic cannibalization still human? Can any cause justify reducing conscious beings to raw materials? What does victory mean when it requires consuming your own species to achieve it? The Emperor's calcium requirements will continue to increase as his ancient body deteriorates further. Future generations will face processing quotas that dwarf current harvesting operations. Eventually, substantial percentages of the imperial population may require annual conversion to skeletal resources just to maintain divine life support functions. At what point does species preservation become species destruction? When does necessary sacrifice become systematic extinction? How do we define survival when it requires consuming the consciousness we're attempting to preserve? These questions have no comfortable answers, only the grim recognition that in the darkness of the far future, humanity's choices exist on a spectrum between different forms of damnation. The calcium harvesting system may represent horror beyond comprehension, but it also enables continued existence in a universe designed to eliminate human consciousness entirely. The citizens queuing for health evaluations participate in their own systematic processing because they understand intuitively that individual survival means nothing compared to collective continuation. The families who bid farewell to deployed relatives recognize that some sacrifices transcend personal loss. The communities that support calcium harvesting operations know that their horror serves purposes greater than their comprehension. In the end, the price of eternity may be precisely what the Imperium has paid: the systematic transformation of human beings into the raw materials required for divine sustenance. Every processed citizen becomes part of the Emperor's eternal struggle against chaos. Every harvested skeleton joins the divine framework that holds human civilization together across the galaxy. The golden throne pulses with the heartbeat of a god sustained by the bones of his faithful, its chambers filled with calcium extracted from 50,000 processed human beings every day. The conveyor systems never stop running. The processing facilities never cease their operations. The transport ships never end their deliveries of skeletal resources. And somewhere in the depths of the Imperial Palace, massive injection systems carry liquid calcium into the Emperor's failing bones, each drop containing the essence of citizens who volunteered their skeletons for divine nutrition. Their consciousness has ended, but their physical substance continues to serve, literally becoming part of the being whose existence protects humanity from extinction. This is the price of survival in the 41st millennium, not just death, but systematic transformation into divine building materials, not just sacrifice, but conversion into the literal substance of godhood, not just service during life, but contribution after death to the cosmic consciousness that guards human civilization against the darkness. In the grim darkness of the far future, there is no death, only recycling. Every imperial citizen will eventually serve the emperor twice, once through faith and devotion during life, and once through calcium and mineral contribution after processing. Their bones will join his bones, their sacrifice will become his strength, their individual faith will merge with the divine consciousness that holds the Imperium together. The system is perfect in its efficiency, horrible in its implications, and absolutely necessary for human survival. The Emperor consumes his faithful not from cruelty, but from necessity, transforming individual death into collective protection through systematic processing operations that span the galaxy. And tomorrow, 50,000 more citizens will contribute their skeletons to divine sustenance, their bones joining the endless calcium tide that keeps humanity's God Emperor from crumbling into the dust of ages. The Golden Throne will pulse with renewed strength, its life support systems nourished by fresh sacrifice, its divine occupant sustained for another day by the processed remains of his willing faithful. The price of eternity, paid one skeleton at a time forever.